Faith unpasteurized. Anyway, there you go. That's a sound that makes me feel comfortable. Here's another one. Yeah, that's right. Diet Dew opening up. It's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I don't know even what time it is in the morning. Anyway, I'm here to do another wonderful episode of Faith Unpasteurized. And this one is for our Catechism year, Lesson 1, Salud. Or as they say in Greek, Yasu. Anyway, this is our Catechism year, and we're going to talk about, so what is Catechism, right? So that's the Lord's Prayer, the Ten Commandments, and the creeds. So we're going to spend some time talking about that this year. We're going to spend some time talking about what it means to be Lutheran, some ins and outs of this thing we call the ELCA, what that even means, what's a synod and a bishop and all those kinds of things, okay? So we're going to do that. But we're going to start today on our first foray into this is the Lord's Prayer. And the first thing that you encounter in the Lord's Prayer is God, right? We're talking about God the Father, our Father who art in heaven. Well, what does that mean, right? What does God look like? What is God to people? So what I did is I took some pictures off my own camera roll, and I put it out on Facebook to see if anybody would give me some sort of pictures of what they envision as God. So there's lots of different things. Like, where do you find God in the world? Where do you experience that fulfilling feeling, that direction, that inspiration? Okay, so I'm going to actually start my little slideshow, and I'm going to kind of talk over it, so I'll put myself down in a corner and we'll see if we can make this work, because I ain't much of a techie. But you know what? We're going to try it. So here we go. We're going to do that, and then we're going to do this. Who is God? I should have moved that a little bit. Anyway, those pictures will change all on their own, and I'll kind of bamf in and out. So who is God? So we find in the Bible that God identifies himself. So Moses at the burning bush, right? This voice comes out of a bush, and the bush is not being consumed by the fire. And Moses says, who is this talking? And what does God say? He says, come closer, remove your sandals. He says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. In the Old Testament, remember, we talked about that. If you met God and you experienced that kind of face-to-face meeting in the Old Testament, you figured you were going to tip over dead. So Moses was scared. And then a little while later, when we get to the beginning of the Ten Commandments, God starts right off with the first commandment. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods, small g, before me. So God identifies himself as the great I am, right? The beginning and the end, the Alpha, the Omega, all of it, right? That's how God defines himself. That's how he introduces himself. That's what he says he is to us. Well, which is all fine and dandy, but what I don't want to do is inspire you to think that you only meet God in a church. Like, look at this picture. I mean, for those of us, me included, that have had children and now are into the point where I'm getting grandchildren, having that baby grab your hand is that feeling of fulfillment, that feeling of close connection. So this close connection, this thing we call the family of God, right, is connected. We are all connected together with each other in the family of God, with God, of course, because God created us, and then also with the environment around us, with this world that God gave us. Remember the creation story? God is walking around with Adam and Eve, and he says, look at all this stuff that I made, the entire world, all of it. I'm going to give it to you, and you take care of it. And then somewhere along the line, we started thinking, wow, we've got some gifts that we can share. We've got people that we can be. We've got talents and treasure and time and all of that. that we are called to share with each other. We all have a unique certain something that God has given us. So where God is, who God is in that sharing and receiving of God himself, who can show up in the faces of children and grandchildren, who can show up in the wilderness around us, who can show up in the tiniest of little places and then in the biggest of places as well. And then we have that connection with each other. So I have grandchildren. I've been married for almost 35 years to my high school sweetheart. That's a great story, by the way. I have a family that is, some are with us physically here on earth. Some are not. My dad died 10 years ago. I have friends that I end up exchanging time and energy and relationship with, and it's in that relationship that I find this fulfillment, and it's what makes me me. So you guys are journeying towards confirmation. You can see that little picture. I take these selfies every year, but you're journeying towards that to claim some promises and to start living into this whole thing of God, this family of God. So when we say in the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, we're saying that God is first and foremost. But then if we claim him as Father, then we admit somewhere along the line and we profess that we are a family. So I cannot say to myself, I'm it. I have to say that if God is Father, then we are a God family. That means that this prayer begins with acknowledging that those around us and those in our family matter. So if you think of your own brothers and sisters, your own aunts, uncles, parents, grandparents, cousins, all of that, you can start to feel those connections and realize that you really wouldn't be a whole lot without them. Even if your brothers and sisters irritate you, you wouldn't be who you are without that family. Your very identity as a child of God is so intertwined with the people around you when you confess God as Father. And then if you think about it as the caretaking, if you're going to think of God as a parent, then you have to somewhere also believe that God's kind of primary duty is to take care of you, is to give you banana bread, right? I made that one time. I thought, what a great picture. Anyway, is to give you the food and the water and the stuff of life. There's a great little poem. You can pause it there if you want to. But the thing is that all of this provision, when you confess God as Father, you're giving your life and your care over to God. Now, it's not about you. It's about God taking care of you and you living into your kind of, I'm not going to say responsibility because that somehow denotes some sort of duty. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is getting to the point where you realize that you have a place in God's family and it is unique. There is only one you. And God knows that. When God made you the way God made you for something you can do that only you can do exactly the way you're made, right? So you are perfect. And when you confess God as Father in the Lord's Prayer, you're embracing your own perfection as a unique child of God who is functioning in the big, wide world in a way that only you can function. And you all have those tiny little unique things that when you confess God as Father in the Lord's Prayer, you're taking on to you. And it is awesome. Your unique little gift is as big as this picture and as powerful as this picture because you don't even know the effect that you have around you. The other thing that when you confess God as Father that you need to remember is your parents, God included, love you completely. There's nothing that you can do that will make God love you more or less. It's the same way with your own parents, right? With your earthly parents. If you ask your parents, is there anything I can do to make you love me more or less? I would imagine that 99.9% of the time, outside of the times that they're frustrated because you won't clean your room, but 99.9% of the time they're going to say no. And love isn't necessarily like, right? I mean, we can do things that irritate people all the time, but that love that comes from God is complete. We describe God all the time as slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. That is the picture of that Father, that teacher, the caretaker, the provider that we get when we talk about in the Lord's Prayer about God, our Father. So I know that there are some times in the world where you meet people who have not been treated well by a father, but this is our Heavenly Father. This is the one who created us, who loves us more than anything. We confess that in the Lord's Prayer, and we embrace our position as brothers and sisters, siblings, if you will, in the family of God, and therefore with Christ himself as the family of God. So think about that when you pray the Lord's Prayer. Join me again next week, and we'll see what we can do. Thanks for being here. I'm going to remember these are coming at you every week. We're going to talk about the Lord's Prayer for 3 of these little episodes, and then move on to other parts of the Catechism. You'll get one of these every week, even though you only meet in class once a week. These little episodes will come at you, and somewhere along the line we'll start talking about what it means to be confirmed and how we're going to make that work when we get to those one-on-one meetings, how we're going to make that work in a COVID world, and then how we're going to make confirmation itself next fall work. I think we'll be able to make it work. But again, the struggles of being in the family of God, with God as our Father, Jesus as our brother. So take care. Blessings on your journey. I'm praying for every one of you. Amen.